Good morning. We're going to continue and learn our fourth and final method that we can use to solve quadratic equations, which is the quadratic formula. This is in addition to factoring square roots and completing the square. Before we do that, we're also going to talk about the discriminant, which is going to help us to determine the number and type of solutions for a quadratic equation. Okay, so you did learn the quadratic formula in Algebra 1, so this should look familiar. It is derived by completing the square. Check out this video here if you want to see that. You can always use it to solve any quadratic equation. And there is a song here that you learned in Algebra 1 to help you memorize it.
When you need to memorize a quadratic formula, a nice way is to sing it. I find that it fits nicely to Pop Goes the Weasel. X equals negative b plus and minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Again, x equals negative b plus and minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Okay, so hopefully you have that memorized, and if not, that song brought it back from Algebra 1. There are a couple other videos here, but I'm going to leave those. We're going to use that here in a little bit. Before we do that, we're going to talk about the discriminant. The discriminant is part of the quadratic formula, so the b squared minus 4ac, and it can be used to determine how many and what type of solutions you have for your quadratic equation. So, in this table, you'll see a few situations. Move this out of the way. First option is if your discriminant is positive. Okay, if your discriminant is positive, that means when we graph this, like we did in, like we're going to do here soon. No, we already did. Graph this, there's two real solutions. Okay, they could be decimals, they could be whole numbers, could be integers, just depends on where the graph lies. If you actually get 0 for your discriminant, that means there's only one real solution, and that's when your vertex falls right on your x-intercept, or on your x-axis. And then if you get a negative, that means that my graph never crosses the x-axis, and I have two imaginary solutions. So that's where those complex numbers and imaginary numbers come into play. You do need to memorize this. If I get a positive, it's 2 real, 0 is 1 real, negative is 2 imaginary. It will make your life easier as we go. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and determine the number and type of solutions for each quadratic equation here. So I'm going to do b squared minus 4ac for all of these. And before I can do that, I have to make sure that my equation is actually equal to 0. So notice in the second one, I'm kind of moving some stuff around. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And then same thing in this third one. I'm going to move that 2 over. So I have negative 5x squared minus 12 equals 0. Okay. So first one, I labeled a, b, and c already. So we're going to plug that into the formula for the discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac. And that's the part that goes inside the square root of the quadratic formula. So we are going to do 7 squared minus 4 times negative 9 times negative 4. Two really common mistakes here. Students don't put parentheses around things when they plug them in, especially in their calculator, and it gives them the wrong answer. And students forget to pay attention to their signs. So like this 4 is negative, that 9 is negative. Okay? I'm going to type this in exactly as I have it written with parentheses and everything. So we're going to do parentheses 7 squared minus 4, and then parentheses negative 9, and then parentheses again negative 4. If you're using my calculator, it will take care of all the work for you. You find your discriminant is negative 95. Well, if it's a negative number, doesn't matter what the number is, it means you have two imaginary solutions. Okay. We're going to do the same thing with the second one, a, b, c. So plugging in b squared minus 4 times a times c. Notice I plugged everything into parentheses. And when I type that in to my calculator exactly as I see it, I get 0. That means there is only one real solution. Okay, the last one, I have a, but I don't have a b here. And the reason I don't have a b here is because I don't have this term, I don't have an x there. So when I plug this in, b is 0, there's nothing there. So 0 squared minus 4 times A times C. And if I type that in my calculator, I get -240. So again, a negative is 2 imaginary solutions. Okay. We're going to take this a step further, and we are going to solve now using the quadratic formula. So the first step is to make sure that you have an equal 0 here. If it's not equal to 0, you can't do the quadratic formula. And then we're going to go ahead and find the discriminant. So my discriminant, remember, is b squared minus 4ac. And we are going to type that in our calculator. So negative 11 squared minus 4 times 2 times 12 gives me 25. Okay, so my discriminant is 25. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to break this down. We just found this part for the quadratic formula. So the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. We just did that part all over 2a. My second step, I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of that or break it down. So the square root of 25 gives me 5. That way, when I plug this in, I actually don't have to do any work for this part, because in those 2 steps we already took care of all that. So what I'm going to do for step 3 then is the opposite of b is 11, and my plus or minus sign, and then instead of that I just found that all of that is 5 over 2 times a, which is 2. I'm going to simplify 11 plus or minus 5 over 2 times 2, which is 4. And we're going to get 2 answers. To do that, we're going to split this into 2 parts. So I'm going to do 11 plus 5 over 4, and 11 minus 5 over 4. Now, if you're going to type this right into your calculator, you need to put parentheses around the top. I'm going to do this in 2 steps. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. And if I subtract those, I get 6 divided by 4, which simplifies to 3/2. So my answers are k equals 4. That's a positive 4. And 3/2. Let's do another one. Before I can do anything, I have to make sure it's equal to 0. Notice that I don't have an equal 0 here, so I'm going to move this stuff over. And you could just do minus b squared if you want to. And I'm going to move both of those to the left side. So I end up with v squared plus 11b plus 15 equals 0. So I have a, b, and c here. We're going to find our discriminant to start. So a is 1, b is 11, c is 15. And we're going to do b squared minus 4 times a times c. Type that in our calculator. And we get 61 for an answer. Okay, now step 2 is to take the square root of that. I can't simplify that at all, so I'm going to leave that. Step 3, I'm going to plug it in. So this goes into my quadratic formula along with the opposite of b. So the opposite of b is negative 11 plus or minus, we found the square root of 61 in steps 1 and 2, all over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay, so 2 times 1 is 2. I get negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 61 all over 2. I actually can't do anything else to break that down since 61 is not divisible by any of our perfect squares. So that is our final answer. That equals b. Go ahead and try these 2. Notice there's not a b there, so your b is 0. And then we are actually going to practice this a little bit more tomorrow with some imaginary numbers in our solutions. So have a good day.